Thailand has never been big on a world news map, and when this country appears in the headlines, it's mostly about a soft story, mostly involving, well, animals maybe, elephants, panda here. But unfortunately, the political crisis of recent years, causing violent street protests and the power struggle, they have colored the country differently in the eyes of the international media. Often it is portrayed simply as yellow versus red, PAD versus UDD, royalists against Thaksin loyalists, urban versus rural. But these simple labels don't simply cut it. They do not fully explain the multi-layered, multi-fraction conflict with dozens of actors, motives, agendas, and causes. This is graphic. I gotta explain this graphic first. So, last year at the University of Hamburg, we had a political panel discussion about the Thai political crisis, and we also did this graphic as the logo of the talk. And as you can see, there are different fractions, there are many different words, and there are also many layers to this political crisis. You could say it looks like a mess. In fact, it has been ongoing for nearly a decade. This graphic that I found online shows you the waves, the tidal waves of the political movements that have been changing over the years, and as you can see, there have been a lot of events that have painted this decade in Thailand. People come, people go, parties get dissolved, we get prime ministers, but the problems are still here. So it doesn't come as a surprise that media outlets, both domestic and international, find great difficulty to make this struggle comprehensive for the viewers. When I was thinking about creating this talk, I wanted to cover three areas. One is the competing narratives of the retro protests of last year between the mainstream and state media of Thailand and also the red shirts, represented here by the logo of the Thai Journalists Association, and also the international media, represented here by the logo of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. The international media that were literally, sometimes literally, caught in the crossfire, the battle of perceptions that it has been also fueled by reactionary reflexes of the Thai population. The second area I want to talk about is the role of social media during these protests, and why this protest is not fueled by social media, and why we won't see anything like that we have seen recently in North Africa and in the Middle East. I want to explain why this is not going to happen in Thailand anytime soon, at least what I think. And the third area, some may call this shameless self-promotion. I want to talk a little bit about my work as well. So, before we get into the topic, I want to explain to you the Thai media landscape. We start off with the TV channels. Television is the most consumed media in this country, and also for many people the primary news source. There are 6 channels that are free to air. Here they are. And let's go through them very quickly. Channel 3, that is a commercial television channel. Channel 5 and 7, that's pretty interesting. They are owned and operated by the armed forces. Modern 9, down here, formerly Channel 9. They were state-owned actually, but they have been privatized in 2004. NBT, or commonly known for the Thais as Hoi Muang, the purple seashell. That has been Channel 11 before, now it is the national public broadcaster. Thai PBS down there, that has also a very interesting past. Back in the 1990s, that channel was an independent private channel, but then during the Thaksin government, that has been bought by Thaksin's Shincorp Corporation. After the military coup, it has been renationalized under the Surya government, and now it is as the name says, public broadcasting service. Like everywhere else in this world, these television channels have varying amounts of news broadcasts dedicated to the whole program. Some have very in-depth news bulletins or news shows in the evening. Some have also political discussion shows. But there are also some channels who just have to show news because they have to show it because in order to be regarded as a full television channel that covers everything. But most of the time, they fill the time with Macauns and so forth. I'm not saying which one. The second important media outlets are the daily newspapers. On principle, newspapers have a larger diversity of opinions than broadcast media. So, in order to visualize and explain how this looks like, I have created this table. So as you can see, quality papers up, tabloid below. Tabloid doesn't necessarily mean they are yellow press. They do have political analysis and they do also run political stuff, despite the front pages of certain newspapers that mostly show traffic accidents or such things. And also I have to explain the labels conservative and progressive. It is of course difficult in this time political crisis to put labels that we know from the Western and try to apply this to this type of political crisis. I put them in quotations because progressive and conservative simply wouldn't work. So I have to explain why I chose these words and what they actually mean. Conservative in the time political context means, and it depends how these newspapers relate to the democracy movements of the 1970s. Tyrant and Daily News are two newspapers that were founded during the military rule, and thus they needed to maintain good relationships with the army and the bureaucratic elite, and thus they tended to lean more to the status quo. So then on the opposite end, the so-called progressive media outlets, they were anti-establishment or rather more anti-military rule. But nowadays, I would argue this chart, or the positioning of each newspaper in this chart, also depends how they regard and how they relate to the Thai military coup of 2006, and how they also were during the Thaksin administration. So let's take a look here. As you can see, there are many newspapers, and I'll let you take a look for a minute. I've also included the two English language newspapers, Nation and the Bangkok Post. And the best-selling newspapers are actually Thailand and Daily News. Thailand has an estimated publication numbers of 1 million, and the other one of almost 900,000. So, I'm not going to talk about radio, because that is a whole other topic, and let's skip to this part, how the Thai press actually works. So, I will explain you that so you will maybe understand the topics that we'll raise later. There is good reporting in the Thai media. There is investigative journalism in the Thai press, but in the bigger picture of things, this is rather the exception than the rule. Duncan McCargo, he is an academic from the University of Leeds. He wrote a book in 2002 that is called Politics and the Press in Thailand, Media Machinations. So this book has been published in 2002. The research that was done for this book, that has been done in the 1990s. But unfortunately, the findings in this book are still valid today. And I'll tell you what he has found out. So he said, there are two types of headlines, or two types of news in the newspapers. Headlines and columns. Headlines, he described as a collection of quotations, opinion, and viewpoints of politicians and important figures. And columns, those are opinions and viewpoints of important figures inside the newsroom. So mostly the editor-in-chief. So you can already see there are very solid hierarchical structures in the newsroom, that are not very encouraging to journalists to do their own reporting or to go just beyond collecting quotes and sound bites. And the columnists, on the other hand, they often write very ambiguously in order to show off insider information or to pretend like they're in the know. Yes, I got connections. I know this person, but I can't tell you why. And I know something from that person, but I can't fully disclose what he said. The effect, though, is it makes it completely inaccessible for the normal readers who are not in the know, who have not followed the developments over a longer period of time. And McHugger also wrote this, which pretty much nails it, in my opinion. He said that there is largely no sense of obligation to fully provide context and explain political and socio-economic developments. Another problem that comes with the time press is the Bangkok centralism, or the focus on Bangkok. So most newspapers, or nearly all newspapers and media outlets, they are based in Bangkok. And when stories are done from outside of Bangkok, they are mostly done by stringers or freelance journalists who live in the other cities in this country. McHugger also said that these stringers are not unlikely to be involved in cronyism with local officials. So these people can be affected by cronyism, and that can also tarnish the reporting and the objectivity of the articles. And last but not least, I want to explain the media landscape of the foreign press in Thailand. So, many international news outlets choose Bangkok as a regional hub. Of course, it is well located in Southeast Asia, almost right in the middle. And already back during the Vietnam War, that was a preferable location to stay. It was not that far away from Vietnam. Nowadays, it's not that far away from Burma. There are a lot of journalists who cover Burma from Thailand, especially here from Chiang Mai. And yes, most of them have a presence of some sort. Some have full correspondent bureaus. Some only have one hired freelancer, but that's already one representative of this media outlet. There is a solid network of stringers, contacts, and translators in this country, but that also, on the other side, has the effect that many correspondents, especially on TV, haven't been in Thailand for a longer period of time, and I'm talking about decades. And also, many news organizations, they rotate their correspondents after a certain amount of time. So, let us come to the main, one of the main topic points. That is the red shirt protests of last year. So, I'm not going to explain and recite everything that has happened last year, but a little bit of background before the protests. In February, a Thai court has decided to seize Thaksin's frozen money. It was more than half. But nevertheless, the red shirts have organized the protest long before that, and regardless of the outcome of the court ruling. And they were demanding various stuff like, of course, fresh elections. And we may remember this government of Abhisit has come to power not by popular elections. When the residents came to Bangkok in March, and they came into large numbers, like it was said like 90,000 or even more than 100,000, that people in Bangkok and also the press in Bangkok were genuinely shocked. They were caught off guard that actually that many people came here and that they came in huge droves into Bangkok. I remember many headlines saying the Red Sea or the Red Invasion coming to Bangkok. But that has also to do that the Thai press has failed to see what was actually going on outside of Bangkok. Many foreign press outlets have had actually some coverage of the activities of the rituals, of what was going on outside Bangkok. For example, they have reported about fundraising events in the Isan region almost every other evening. and that they have raised much money to actually organize this protest. The perception before actually the first violent clash of April the 10th, they have been said as they're peaceful, they're festive, and the red shirts themselves, they try to portray themselves as, they try to portray this whole political protest as a class struggle, and that they said they are commoners of the Bangkok elite, or as they use it, Thai. And here comes one of the fault lines. And many foreign news outlets, well, not many, but there are enough foreign news outlets that have actually fallen for this underdog oversimplification or they needed to resort to this oversimplification of red versus yellow and so on. I just mentioned earlier because of lack of printing space or lack of on-air time. But there are other journalists that have generally fallen for that underdog image, and they portray this like a David and Goliath scenario. As we all know, this situation deteriorated over the weeks. There have been violent clashes, and the journalists were caught in the middle of it. One of the problems was that most journalists were not trained for this kind of violence, because that has also to do with not many journalists actually anticipated that it would actually get that worse. So and also here's another picture. You can already see the journalist that was on May 19th huddled on the ground with flak jackets and bulletproof helmets, actually basically calling for safety and not to get caught in the crossfire. Circumstances were already difficult enough, so hence to report a complete picture of what actually happens is nearly impossible, and especially if news outlets have only one reporter, you cannot paint the whole picture and you cannot report what you didn't see. And now we come to the criticism of the foreign media. Many have accused the foreign media to be sloppy, one-sided, or overly sympathetic to the red shirts. I'll just explain that a little bit why. And also, well, here's another knockout argument. They cannot understand Thailand. Well, of course not. And, well, another argument that people like to say, they've been paid by taxing anyway. Well, I mean, some journalists would be rather paid by taxing. I mean, the industry is not very good at the moment, financially. I want to show this. This is one example of the criticism of the foreign media. There has been an open letter by a young lady published on Facebook, and this has gone viral. This has been forwarded to everybody. This has been passed on multiple times, and people liked it. And also The Nation, they ran this, and they reprinted that in one of the newspapers, and they were one of the biggest cheerleaders of this open letter. And as we can see, it has been directed at CNN, and it reads, all of Mr. Rivers and Mrs. Snyder's, this is the correspondence, quotes and statements seem to have been solely taken from the anti-government protest leaders or their followers/sympathizers. No direct interviews with government officials have been shown. Well, here's the problem. There have been actually interviews with all government officials. There was an interview with Gonchatika Vanit, the finance minister, for example. So, this was actually one of the more rational criticisms of the foreign media. And also, the letter goes on to say, why haven't you shown this? Why haven't you shown that? Why haven't you shown red shirts obstructing ambulance work? Why haven't you shown actually red shirts being armed and shooting on their own people? Well, as I said earlier before, reporters can only report what they have actually seen. Everything else, what they have not seen, is just either unverified rumors or other report. This is one example that has been used by the Thais to show, see, there aren't. And there are some factors that led to the criticism of foreign media. One of them are parachuted journalists. Parachuting is a term in journalism that means when something's going on, they send all their reporters there, even though they're not based there, but to cover it. Of course, that means these journalists haven't been based there, they haven't been too long enough to see the developments. And as I said before, CNN had two correspondents. One is Dan Rivers, who has been actually there for years, and the other one was Sarah Snyder, not Snyder, by the way. She's based in India, and she has been parachuted into Thailand once things got rough. The other one is, of course, shooting the messenger. As I said before, they are blaming the reporter for the failure to report what he has seen. Or basically, no, scratch that. They have blamed the foreign reporter for their reporting what they have not seen. Shock and awe. What I mean with that is that many people were genuinely shocked what happened, and that they have not imagined that it would be turn out that bad. And they were not trying to comprehend why, and then they needed a scapegoat. That's why they resorted to the foreign correspondence. That's one part of that. This is one I read on Bangkok Pundit. He's one of the most prolific bloggers and also a fellow colleague of mine, an Asia correspondent. And he wrote an article called Thai. Anybody speaks Chinese here? No? Okay, Feng Qing. Sorry for that. Feng Qing means angry youth. And this term has been coined during the Tibet uprisings of 2008 in the spring, when also there has been more or less a media lockout, but there were still foreign reporters reporting on what actually happened, and they were basically betting against the Chinese official narrative. But what many people did not anticipate was the reactions of the Chinese netizens. Many of them have been writing angry letters or angry foreign posts and have been basically blasting the foreign media with the same arguments or with the similar arguments we have seen just right now. But there has been some mistakes done by the Thai media as well during this protest. The media landscape in Thailand is volatile and partisan, and not only, I'm talking about the state media, but also the yellow shirts and the red shirts, they had their own media outlets. ASTV is one of the yellow shirts, PTV or DNN or whatever they call it nowadays, by the red shirts. Of course, only the red shirt TV station has been targeted by the authorities. And people who already have, and the supporters of each of these groups, they have already solidified their opinions. And it always seems to be for each viewpoint there is a media outlet, or a TV channel, if you so to speak. Another problem is censorship, or self-censorship. I have to remind you that during the protests, and even long after the protests until the end of this year, there has been a state of emergency decree, which also allows the authorities to, well, basically intervene in reporting. Heavy reliance on official statements. Well, as I just explained by my cargo that most journalists have just went out and collected news bites and sound bites by officials. But journalism isn't just simply he said, she said. It's also, as I said before, providing context, and that has been missing as well. And also, hardly any comprehensive coverage during crisis. There has not been any breaking news coverage on most channels. Instead, they stuck to their regular programming and showed, look, soap operas and lacons. So, where does this lead us? One of the consequences has been, for example, that CNN has closed its Bangkok bureau after there have been threats made against Dan Rivers, which is sad, to be honest with you, because that basically says CNN has wiped Thailand off their news map. And I don't know if you have seen the CNN coverage during the election this year, but there hasn't been much, to be honest with you. they, of course, parachuted another correspondent on election day itself, but before that, they have mostly pulled stuff from news agencies or basically bought footage from somewhere else instead to do their own reporting. Also, what is also worth noting is that several journalists have been injured and killed. Two of them have been killed. Hiro Muramoto from Reuters, he's a cameraman, he's been killed on April the 10th. And Fabio Poleghi, he is an Italian freelance journalist, he has been shot on May 19th. And also, as I said, many other journalists have been wounded. A colleague who I'm working with now, he has been, for example, wounded by a rubber bullet and broke his forearm. On the other hand, many people were trying to stylize this, for example, the burning of Central World, as Thailand's 9/11 moment. But rather, not because of the loss of human lives, but rather because of the loss of, well, property. Now, I'm turning now the focus on social media. There have been arguments made in the last few months that the protest of the red shirts at Rajabasong is parallel to the demonstrations in Egypt at Tahrir Square. Well, no. You cannot compare these two together. There are several factors why you cannot say Rajabasong is Tahrir Square. Yes, there are of course similar themes and also similar motives. But this is also not a social media revolution. Okay, so let's do a straw poll here. How many of you have a Twitter account? What's Twitter? Twitter is a microblogging. Twitter is a microblogging service where you write short messages to the world, to the public in 140 characters or less. So say again, who is on Twitter? Okay, that's a little bit more than half. And who's here on Facebook? Nearly everybody. Okay, so yeah, that kind of reflects also on the total numbers. There are over 10 million Facebook users, but there are about 1 million Twitter users as well. By the way, Facebook is according to their own numbers, the second fastest growing market for them. And the role of social media in a political discourse has of course been much discussed. When we take the media as the fourth estate, some scholars, some media professors have argued that social media is then the fifth estate. They said bloggers are fifth estate, but they don't say it's not the extension of the medias, but they are well-networked individuals. And also the fifth estate then also makes the fourth estate accountable, and so on and so forth. I will show you here some numbers why this cannot be a social media revolution. I chose Thailand, Egypt, and Iran, and I chose Iran with it because in 2009, before the elections, this has been also touted as a social media revolutions or the Twitter revolutions. That has also to do because most of the international media has been locked out. So, as we can already see in the first blue circles there, Egypt and Iran have a much younger population. Almost 2/3 of them, well not 2/3, but almost 60% are under 30 years old. There's also high youth unemployment in those countries, regardless if the 4.3% is actually true or not. And also, but despite that, Thailand, and that's what I found very surprising, Thailand has a higher internet penetration than the other two countries, 27%. I also have to explain that at the end with Iran, 11 and 38. 11%, that's the number, that's a figure of an official state survey. 38 is the number that was actually found out. But here's the striking part for me. In Thailand, there is a higher rural population than in the other two countries. So, in conclusion, even though Thailand there are more internet users in Thailand, they are most likely to be found in Bangkok. And also another problem, in my point of view, is the political apathy of the youth. So this is an article from the Bangkok Post. They wrote about a survey done last year. And basically, there's a sentence written in bold that says it all. But 54% said they paid little attention to politics, and 8.1% said they gave it no attention at all. The role of social media in Thailand itself during the protest, we have to differentiate here for several factors. First off, Twitter has been largely used to inform about events, not to organize the protests. So people there are of course registered activists who are on Twitter and they have tried to get their message across, but most of them are not politically involved, but they have rather tweeted about what actually has happened. And also we have to differentiate again between the English language community on Twitter and the Thai language community here on Twitter. So I belong to the Thai English language community, so it could be a different perception of things. And also one other thing that's striking to me is hate speech and witch hunt that has been done online. There is, for example, a Facebook group called Social Sanction. It has about 12,000 likes. And it depicts itself as the protector of the country against corruption, against all the evil people that are threatening our country. They are basically witch hunting those who are perceived to be disloyal to the state, and of course to the monarchy, and they actively cyberbully these people. They have been instructions to them: if you see somebody who you think is not loyal to the monarchy, use the rudest word you can think of and get him or her. And there have been actually several cases of that. For example, last year there is this casting show, this music casting show, Academia Fantasia, and one of the contestants has said something, well, politically ambiguously, but then he has been basically blasted online by those people. And he had to issue an apology. So, I will try to argue here that social media did not play a big role during the Red Shirt protest. What has been used instead, I'm calling it folk media. Anybody has an idea what I could mean with that? Folk media? Any ideas?
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth, yeah, that's one. Anything else?
Radio.
Community radio? You said music pod chambers? Well, CDs, yes. Telephone, yes, yeah, telephone, yeah. People were trying to organize via SMS, well, via text, and also, yeah, BCDs, CDs, also with music videos. Word of mouth, that is also very important, and leaflets, of course, leaflets, the most basic form of social media. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, they also had their own TV stations and community radio stations to get the message across and to organize. Internet censorship is also another problem that prevents the social media revolution. So, Freedom House, an NGO based in New York, they have recently labeled Thailand as not free, and Thailand now is in the company of Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Pakistan, Rwanda, China, Saudi Arabia, and Cuba. Reporters Without Borders, or Reporters Sans Frontières, they have put Thailand under surveillance in the category of threats to the internet or threats to internet freedom. And what I'm going to mention a lot the acronym MICT, that is the Ministry of Information and Communications Technology. Normally they are there to regulate the communications market, the telephone thing. They are also the reasons why we don't have that much 3G coverage here. Well, it's actually more complicated than that, but you gotta blame somebody. But they're also very active in curtailing online content. Look, that's too early. So, in recent years, there have been several figures about how many websites have been blocked in Thailand. There are very different figures. One I heard is, the minimum I heard is 113,000. The highest number is 300,000 websites. And they are not necessarily all politically, because of political reasons. Of course, many of them are because of scams and pornography. But the number of websites being blocked for political reasons is on the rise now. And one of the reasons is the Computer Crimes Act of 2007. I will get into that a little bit later. And also the Last State Law, Article 112 of the Criminal Code. You get 15 years in prison for, and I quote, "whoever defames, insults, or threatens the king, the queen, the heir to the throne, or the regent." It does not define what defamations mean, and we get to see where this could be problematic. So the Computer Crimes Act of 2007 has been written, well, 2007 of course, it was post-coup, after the military coup of 2006, by the post-coup government. And the reason why this has been created was a certain YouTube video that depicted the king in not very flattering way. The Thai government asked YouTube to pull it down. YouTube said, not going to pull it down. So they blocked the whole webpage. And so with that in mind, they have created the Computer Crimes Act in order to have a better legal groundwork to combat that, but they also had other things in mind, of course, fighting against online scams and also other, or Nigeria connection, that's one of those, and also protecting consumers during online shopping. But we're not talking about that, of course. So here's an example of the law itself. So the perpetration of an offense under Section 9 or 10 that causes damage, and also an act that is likely to damage computer data or a computer system related to the country's security, public security, and economic security or public services. Again, very ambiguously written. What does it actually mean? Anybody speak English here? Here's another one. If any person commits any offense of the following acts shall be subjected to imprisonment that involves an import to a computer system of false computer data in a manner that is likely to damage the country's security or cause a public panic. Again, where's the definition? Where's the definition of that? And of course, here, as we said, that involves import to a computer system of any computer data related with an offense against the kingdom's security under the Criminal Code, 112. So basically, the worst case you can get, as somebody who's online, is getting a double whammy with this Computer Crimes Act and lèse majesté. And the last one here, which I also find very striking, any person committing an offense against this act outside the kingdom, and the offender is Thai and the government of the country where the offense has occurred or the injured party is required to be punished, and the offender is a non-citizen and the Thai government, so basically it says is required to be punished shall be painless within the kingdom. So basically, the internet is a ground where you can be charged for in Thailand when you say something wrong that is not compliable with the laws we just had. One of the most famous cases of this, somebody being charged is Chiranut Bengchapon, or also known in her nickname Jiu. She is the webmaster and the director of the alternative news website Prasathai. Prasathai has been targeted several times by the authorities, especially during the Red Shirts protests of last year. They have been blocked numerous times, not with great success, to be honest. Every time when they block one domain, 2 or 3 other domains pop up. But Chiranut has been arrested and charged under the Criminal Crimes Act because she deleted comments under an article that were lèse majesté too late. So basically, she has been charged for something she has not done herself, or she has not written for herself, but still, as the owner or director of the website, she is liable for that. And the process is still ongoing. The first round of hearing has been done in spring, the last And the second round of hearing is now underway at the moment, and from the first reports that I've read, is basically what the prosecution says is that basically we have to anticipate the censor's thinking what could be legal or illegal. So basically we have to self-censor ourselves. And another program from the government and from the MICT is the so-called Cyber Scout program. That has been set up last year by the Justice Ministry and the MICT, and two objectives were, I quote, to create a Cyber Scout volunteer network that observes online behavior that is deemed a threat to national security and to defend and protect the royal institution. And secondly, to promote the moral and ethics with the help of the volunteers to ensure the correct behavior, build reconciliation and awareness towards the use of information with regard to morality and safety of individuals in society. Sounds pretty good, huh? Basically, how they work is they go through the web boards or social media or through Facebook and Twitter and so on and so forth, look for content and comments that could be illegal or that could be debatable or questionable at best. They reveal themselves to the person and say, listen, what you're doing is wrong, but I give you a chance to change your view. If not, I'm going to alert the authorities. And that's how they work. There has been an article by Agence France Presse a few months ago. And by the way, if anybody wants to contact them, their email address is justice_cyber@hotmail.com. There has been hope that anything will be done or reformed under the new government of Yingluck Shinawatra, but Yingluck Shinawatra herself said in a press conference a week after the elections that she has no plans to amend the lèse-majesté law. And also, the new MICT minister, he also says he's not going to change anything about the Computer Crimes Act. He said, from now on, the ministry's officials and staff members of every level have been urged to be more stringent in the pursuing of violations against the Computer Crimes Act and lèse-majesté on websites by enforcing the law to the fullest. So basically, more of the same. And of course, it is difficult in this volatile political atmosphere to change anything about this, because your enemies would then brand you as anti-monarchist, and that would be the end of any rational discussion. So you're basically done. But the whole thing also reveals that there is a trend of overemphasizing the loyalty by all means, and also a sudden urge by many government institutions to say, yes, we are loyal to the royal institutions. And also, they have the urge to protect the monarchy and the country against a perceived invisible threat, which is the internet. And as we all know, the internet is very scary and very invisible. And very anonymous. And, well, anybody see a correlations between the cyber scouts and also the village scouts of the 1970s? Back then, they have also been set up to fight a perceived communist threat. So, okay, I see we're running out of time, so let's do this last one very quickly and talk a little bit about my work. And I just call this mainstream media against social. So, late August last year, there has been this incident. We see here former Prime Minister Saksith shaking hands with the former President of South Africa, Nelson Mandela. Now, the Thai press, of course, when they see something like this, they go haywire. They were jumping up and down and said, what is he doing? Why is he doing it? What is he doing for? Is he actually sick? Is this photo actually real? So they were jumping and dancing around the issue for the whole day. And back then I was still back in Germany, and I was sitting at home and thought, has actually anybody asked Nelson Mandela himself if this picture was real or not? So that's what I did. I shot it in and I Googled basically how to contact Nelson Mandela. And the first result was actually an FAQ by the South African government that says, how can I contact former President Nelson Mandela? And there it goes, Nelson Mandela Foundation, this telephone number, this address, bingo. So I shot an email and asked them, hey, has this actually taken place? Secondly, what is the nature of this encounter? And third, has there been any pictures taken by the Nelson Mandela Foundation themselves? I didn't expect an answer, so I went to sleep, woke up the next morning, and saw, bing, there is actually an answer. And there you go. So it says, Mr. Saksith, there was no official meeting between Thaksin and Mr. Mandela. Mr. Thaksin paid Mandela a courtesy call when he was visiting the country. Yes, it was a private courtesy call. So this encounter actually took place. So it was morning in Germany and afternoon in Thailand. And I was looking, has actually anybody from Thai media already found that out as well? Nope, not at all. They were still asking around, why does he do that? What is this good for? Is this picture actually real? A whole more than 24 hours, they still haven't found that out. So, without further ado, I put that on my webpage, and this post actually got over 3,000 clicks in one day. And I mean, come on, it wasn't that difficult, was it? It is basic journalism 101. It is the equivalent of going through the front door and ask at the desk. So, let us wrap this up. Conclusion. The Thai mainstream media has not served its role as the fourth estate, as we found out. The vilification of the foreign media tarnishes Thailand's image rather than it protects. Social media as the fifth estate hasn't been established in Thailand yet. Internet monitoring and censorship by the state is on the rise, and because of that, fundamental, structural, and also, I would argue, intellectual problems prevent Thailand from seeing a Twitter revolution anytime soon. And either way, how this political struggle is being perceived, how much the Thais argue against the foreign media and foreign perception, either the Thais can help the world to understand better what was going on in order also to help themselves what is going on, or it can go on with their knee-jerk reactions and alienate the visitors. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready to take your questions. Thank you very much.
The floor is open if you would like to ask any questions.
Yes?
Saksith, can I ask you about nearly the last point about increasing censorship, increasing monitoring?
This one?
Yeah. So you've got, for example, supposedly setting up war rooms.
Yes.
Everyone can have a war room or something. How convinced are you that that is the real run when you're arresting? I'm 50-50 myself about whether it's basically a piece of theatre to close off the vulnerable flank, to look like you're doing stuff when actually you're not.
I agree with you. Oh, yeah, Steve was asking, so the current Deputy Prime Minister Chalom has announced that he's setting up a war room and that he's going to crack down on less majestic offenders as well. And your question was whether this was window dressing or if they mean it seriously, right? So, and you said that you're 50-50. I myself am 50-50 as well. I mean, we know, so many of you know maybe the characteristics of Chalom. He is very erratic in his behavior, and he is also very outspoken. But also, on the other hand, yes, people are some sort of pressure to show results. And by setting up a war room, that may be a result already. So I'm still on the fence. Paul Chambers?
Yeah, great presentation. I was really interested in how the foreign media have
point. I mean, first off, of course, I acknowledge that there have been mistakes and there has been horrible reporting done by the foreign media, as well as on the other side there has been brave and good reporting by the Thai media outlets, for example, Thai PBS and TNN. The question was how the yellow shirts are depicted in the foreign press, right? So it depends on which era you're talking about. 2006, when when it looked like the whole country, whole Bangkok was against Thaksin, the foreign press also sided with yellow shirts and showed that Thaksin, he was a corrupt prime minister, he needs to go. 2008, though, during the airport occupation and shortly before that, things were a little bit different. So basically, that was the first time where they actually started to say, yes, those are loyal to the monarchy, and they already hinted that they are not really for democracy. And today now, it is of course something completely else. But there has been also several colleagues have told me about not being very welcome by the yellow shirts when they say that they're foreign press. So because of the same reason I just told you. Next question. Yes, please.
What's your assessment of the Amistad treatment of Lisa Mang's laws and libel laws?
The assessment of who?
What's your assessment of the libel laws and Lisa Mang's laws of the Amistad administration?
The thing is, it is very interesting because when Prime Minister Saksith came into power, he actually said, or he actually declared that he's going to do something about it, that he's going to reform something about it. And as we all know today, nothing has been done in that regard. Yes, please?
Has there been any reaction in the Thai press to the WikiLeaks portions of the WikiLeaks that involve Thailand?
Not really. Most media outlets have basically denied the existence of WikiLeaks. So basically, every country has a WikiLeaks, and there's a WikiLeaks about every country except for Thailand. Unless, though, it paints Thaksin in a bad way.
What did you mean in your very last point about a lack of intellectual?
Well, okay, intellectual may be the wrong word. I chose this word because there is, okay, full disclosure here, I was born and raised in Germany, so I did not attend a Thai school, and this was not in the Thai education system. But from what I know, and from what I see, and from what I hear, from for example, from my family and from my friends, is there is no critical thinking is not necessarily being taught there, and also media literacy is also not being taught there. So basically, the way we should use media, the way we should regard media, is not being taught very well here in Thailand. I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my perception. Yes?
So what do you attribute the apathy of the young college-age students in Thailand?
The apathy? What about that?
So what do you attribute it to? What are the causes?
What are the causes? I mean, basically, also a sort of being jaded by politics. Seeing that basically nothing has changed in the last 10 years, it's gotten even worse. And more or less the sense of giving up, saying they're all corrupt anyway. I mean, there is a term in Thailand that specifically says "lenkanro," playing politics. And that indicates that politicians are not our people. They are their own caste of people who are doing their own stuff, and it does not really affect our lives. Maybe you could argue that Thaksin, while he's not the most democratic person I've ever seen, has maybe unbeknowingly opened up Pandora's box by re-enfranchising the rural people, and then to show them that that politics, or that they have an influence on politics. Yes, please.
Yes, if I may just step outside of Thailand for a minute to the Arab Spring, and how do you see the social media there and as a general proposition? And my feeling is that we don't know yet. It may just be the strong last winds of March in winter and not early spring. And then when the next government comes along, they could very well take care of this again. You seem to be quite optimistic as though the social media could at some point sort of take off and establish an autonomy against all authority if they try.
So we're talking about the Arab Spring, and also if social media can be a stepping board to more uprising against restrictive. Well, first off, we have to look why this is being said as a social media revolution. Well, one of the causes is, of course, that there has been also a media lockdown. In Egypt, for example, many foreign correspondents have been thrown out, or basically have been harassed, and also Al Jazeera, for example, they have been shut down several times, and they had to rely on social media. And whenever you see these days social media footage, and they also keep adding, we cannot independently verify the content or what has actually happened there. So and also but nevertheless, the role of the traditional media as the gatekeeper of information has been turned upside down. So basically, we are not being restricted by the gatekeepers. We are basically funneling information into the world by ourselves, and we do not have to rely on traditional media as being the gatekeeper. Now, if this is being encouraging and also a launchpad for further uprisings, I cannot really tell. You have to see it on a country-by-country case, and also by a culture-by-culture case. And also, I want to add that yes, the revolution in Egypt was maybe successful, but who came after Mubarak? The military. Paul Chambers?
Last question. I was interested in the diagram you had of the different Thai newspapers and where they are situated ideologically, or so to speak. Since I would think most of these papers are traded in stock market ownership, you have investors and such. Would you say that the type of ideology can shift over time, depending on the ideology of the majority shareholders?
Of course, of course.
Have you looked to see, like, over time, like perhaps during the Thaksin government, one newspaper was more affiliated with?
You already gave me the hint. I mean, Matishon. That newspaper. Or do you want to finish that sentence? Matishon. That newspaper has been bought in 2005, or basically, they have been taken over by people who are allied to Thaksin, and that also made a shift into the editorial line. I mean, one journalist whose name I conveniently forgot. He was anti-Thaksin and he was thrown out basically. And I have to add one thing to the chart. This is a purely subjective depiction of everything. So this is not made. This is not solid. This is not engraved in stone. So don't take it too much for granted. And this is just my perception of the things.
Actually, on that point, can I ask you what dates you actually prepared that chart?
The chart has been done
I mean, by a month.
a few months ago.
Because
A few months ago, I kind of a little bit
as
adjusted.
I recall, you've got Bangkok Post near enough the middle, or at least slightly over towards it. So,
I know where you're referring to.
and in the last 3 months, let's say 4 months possibly, it's lurched much beyond the nation, certainly in my view.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. You know, I mean, the nation has been largely regarded as anti-Thaksin, and has done so. The Bangkok Post, they at least have allowed different opinions and different columnists into the coverage and into the columnists. And as you rightly pointed it out, that has been a shift in tone after the elections, and they have been more aggressive or more jaded about the England government, while the nation itself, they have been rather a little bit more tame, to be honest.
I'm being kind of grown up of the nation, and it kind of seems a Bangkok Post.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought it either.
It's like sulky kids. I don't believe it. I don't understand it.
Yeah, it is. It is. So what did Bangkok Pundit wrote? He made a reference to the saying that once you see how sausage is made, you don't want to eat it anymore. Yes, please.
I was surprised that you mentioned that the Thai baht circulation was only 1 million.
That is
and
the estimation.
they use 900,000. And in my simple Falang mind, I consider them as sort of mass circulation, but it seems very low compared to other countries. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
It's very, very low.
But I can't really remember now where I actually got this number. But that, and as I said, those numbers are estimates.
The so-called urban elite,
Yes.
they have, has been sometimes, some people say they would use the legislative law to protect the status quo. But it seems to be a risky strategy looking forward because it's associated quite a lot, not only with the institution but also a person. Would that backfire? I mean, using that? Would that lead to sort of blogging and interaction? Did you see that could backfire? Because
What specifically would backfire? Or what do you mean?
Well, right now there's a lot of positive loyalty still to the person.
Yes.
But mixed maybe to the institution, but certainly positive to the person. So if there's a change, then would that not mean that having centralized that institution so much again into the debate, that sort of center is then sort of broke, and then you have a different attitude towards the legislature because it prevents from having a real discussion about something.
I have to apologize that I reject to answer this question because that would be very speculative and very.
But the sentiment, doesn't it make it more risky for them? Is it a strategy that could backfire?
To the bloggers or to those who?
To the supporters of the legislative law, that they use something which is actually difficult to understand.
That is difficult to answer, and I apologize that I cannot answer this question.
Earlier today you talked about a new blog called isanrecord.com.
Oh yeah.
And which I find very interesting. We are now Farhan, who are living outside of Bangkok. In other parts of Thailand, who are reporting on local issues, local developments. And I wonder, are there any other examples of that where social media or non-traditional media outlets are being used by the foreign community to better inform about local events that are not Bangkok-centered?
To be very honest with you, I cannot think about one right now on the top of my head. But the Isan record is a good example. So for those who don't know, the Isan record or isanrecord.com is a blog that covers, as the name suggests, happenings going on in the Isan regions, and they actually that is run by two Americans who are at Concord University, and they actually go into the field. They report stuff very well. They actually gone over to doing video and audio, so that's my recommendation to check that out. So to your question, Adam, I cannot really think about one example right now that would be politically related, but there are many other examples that of foreigners using social media to help or to inform people, but it's not necessarily politically related. Yes, please?
What's Voice TV?
Voice TV, yeah, very interesting. Voice TV is a channel that is not very widely available, unfortunately. It is, this channel has been, please correct me if I'm wrong, has this been set, is this run by the kids of Thaksin? Yep, it is run by the kids of Thaksin. I've seen, I watch it sometimes. It basically wants to portray themselves as the opposite to the mainstream media. So in the same sense as MSNBC tried to position themselves counter to Fox in the United States.
Spring News, who does that?
Spring News, yeah, I still don't really know who they are. I mean, the Spring News, I only saw them online, and I don't get that on my TV either. They have been actually set up very quickly from the ground just after the protests have begun, and I also don't really know who they are.
How does the Thai community, including yourself, feel maybe spending more time outside of Thailand blogging there? So the incident where in the US recently an anonymous blogger's identity was given away to the Thai authorities, and now the person has asked Thai, I think, Australia, why had problems of coming to Thailand.
Personally, I do not speak for the Thai community, and I have to put that, I said that before. Personally, so what he's referring to, what he was referring to is to a recent case of a Thai who was naturalized in the United States, who has been arrested in 2006 before the military coup in Thailand because of lèse majesté, because he supposedly posted something. He posted something on a web board that is deemed anti-monarchy, but what he wrote was criticizing the lèse majesté law itself. Now, here's the interesting part. The Canadian ISP, the internet service provider who hosted that forum, basically snitched that guy to the Thai authorities. They gave him the email address and the IP addresses to the Thai authorities. And that's why they could arrest him when this person came to Thailand. So, your question would be what I would feel about that. Well, I still feel on the safe side, but depending on the legal ramifications or the legal changes that could obviously change. But I made it very clear that I do not write about stuff that could get me into legal trouble. Now, of course, does it mean that I have to self-censorship? Well, maybe a little bit, but I can do at least pointers. At least I can point into the direction, but I don't necessarily have to name it. So they are people, there are journalists who make either very ambiguous references to what they're saying, but then there are more journalists, well, not journalists, but more people online that are doing less obvious references.
Doesn't that make you feel like the comparison of Thailand with Saudi Arabia and some other countries you mentioned earlier on is somewhat still unfair? Because, you know, when you look at the press there and what gets said, what gets slammed on is far beyond the political agenda. It could be many issues, whereas here you could still have some debate on quite a few things. So it seems to me these rankings...
That is a good point. That is actually a good point. So we have been talking much about perception. We have been talking about perception, how we see Thailand and where Thailand is going. Of course, it is not as bad as Burma at the moment. It is not as bad as in other countries. It could be much worse. The point I'm trying to make here is the direction where we're going. Are we going to the better side, or are we going into more dark areas? And me personally, and if I allow to go a little bit off script, I'm blogging and I'm writing. My understanding about journalism is to write what is really going on. And also, yes, you could say that I'm subjective in some topics, but I'm doing this because from my feeling, I'm against a sovereign narrative. So that's why I'm challenging the sovereign narrative, because I do not necessarily agree with the official line of events that have happened. I do not agree with the official line of certain developments that has happened, but I still feel the urge to show a different side, to show the other side of the argument. I do not, though, and let me be very clear, I do not impose my views on other persons. I don't want to. I basically want them to read both sides of the argument and make up their own mind.
Okay, on that note, due to time, we can stop here. If you have further questions, you can come and speak with Saksith afterwards. I know he'd be happy to talk with you. But please join me in